inspire.
Welcome back to Starting Now. I'm your host, Jeff Sarris. This is the show where I talk to entrepreneurs to reveal the unexpected paths to entrepreneurship. Today, my guest is Nathalie Lussier. Nathalie is the founder of AccessAlly, which is a WordPress plugin where they help people sell online courses while putting the student experience first. This is a great episode where we dive into Nathalie's entire journey from software engineering in college to building a platform all about raw food through every step of the way to get to where she is today. It's been quite a decade of building, growing, pivoting, adjusting, and I think you're going to get a lot out of this episode. So without further ado, let's just dive right into my conversation with Nathalie Lussier. I want to say it all ties together. Like everything you're doing all fits together with who you are and like where you come from and your experience. But it's amazing to go from raw food all the way into the membership stuff and the software and everything that you're doing. So yeah,
Absolutely.
pretty cool. So where are you located now?
We're actually just moved to Niagara Falls area in Canada. So we were in
nice.
Texas and we moved like pretty much in February, right before the pandemic and everything kind of went crazy. But just for family and yeah, we bought a farm. So we're into like permaculture and all kinds of stuff. So
That's exciting. So
Yeah.
like with permaculture, what does that entail like for you?
So we got chickens and sheep, started planting trees, like a small veggie garden, and we're hoping to expand and just, like learning how all of that fits together, like maybe building a pond, like just a lot of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's very cool. I mean, because it is the sort of getting away from the computer, doing something
Yes.
else is hugely valuable because
Absolutely.
we can definitely live just in the screen all the time.
Yes, it's true. Which is probably not the healthiest habit.
Yeah. No, but that's great. And Niagara Falls, just that area is just awesome.
It is, yeah.
Yeah.
We were looking for like the warmest part of Canada that was still close to family, and this is pretty much it. So it's sort of, we can grow like more like peaches and like warmer kind of season things. So yeah, it works out pretty well.
Yeah, and going from Texas too. I mean, if you weren't in the warmest part of Canada, it's a huge
A pretty
shift.
big shock. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
For sure.
So one of the things I found really interesting, you built your first website at 12 years old?
Yes.
So this is what's really wild is I just talked to someone else like a couple weeks ago who also right around the same age built the first website. I built mine at 14. Website
That's
hosting,
awesome.
like all this stuff. How did that come about like at that early of an age?
Yeah, so I remember my dad got us a computer, and back then everyone was like, "Oh no, beware of the internet! Like it's dangerous for kids, and it's dangerous for everybody. Who knows what's lurking on the other side." But at the time, you got free hosting when you got connected to the internet with the service that we were on, and then I was like, "Oh, what does that mean?" And my dad was like, "Well, you can call, and they'll walk you through it." So like I called and the guy was like, "Oh yeah, here's how you get onto FTP and here's how you upload stuff." And he just walked me through the whole thing. And then after that, he asked my dad, like, "Well, how old is this kid?" and then my dad's like, "Oh, she's like 11 or 12 or whatever." And he was like, "What? Like, that's crazy." So that's kind of how I got like my first website up. But how I got really into it was connecting with a community of people who were into anime and other like things that I was interested in and kind of geeking out on. And they were also into designing a lot of websites. So I was like learning from them and we're kind of like sharing and communicating. And it was more of a community thing than just a solo thing, even though a lot of it was, at home by yourself on your computer. It was kind of the community aspect that really pulled me into it more than anything.
Yeah, and before that, did you consider yourself just like drawn to the computer, drawn to tech, or was it something that the community really brought you into?
I would say the community was a big part of it. I always I liked the computer more for writing. So before we got really connected to the internet, I would write newsletters, which is kind of silly because I still write newsletters today. But and I would basically print them out and sell them to like my family and my friends for like 25 cents each. And it's kind of like a newspaper, right? And so
Uh-huh.
I would actually collect my friends' stories, and then I would type them up and like put everything together and format it and stuff. So I liked kind of the publishing aspect of computers, but I had never really thought about it from a tech aspect. It was more about content and community, I would say. And then as I got older and I learned about code and algorithms and like how everything works and kind of taught myself HTML, then I went more and more into that side of things, and I ended up getting a degree in software engineering. And even when I was choosing like what I want to study, I knew computers would be a big part of it, but I thought I would be more on the design side because I always liked the design aspect. And then I ended up doing more of the coding. And I was like, this is not quite what I signed up for. And I had some internships. So I got to work, in Silicon Valley and Wall Street. And that's kind of where it was like, oh, maybe this is not quite the right fit for me in terms of what I like doing. But like it ended up kind of coming full circle later in my career too.
Yeah, and why don't we jump forward then to today? So, for the listeners, what's the overview of what you do and AccessAlly and everything?
Yeah, so basically I founded AccessAlly in 2014. And at the time, we just released our first plugin called Pop-Up Ally Pro, which was all about, a polite pop-up and how to get people to opt into your email list without annoying them while they're on your website, essentially. And that was a kind of our test product because it was our first time. My husband and I actually is our lead developer. Putting software out there, and we weren't sure how support would be, how we would actually sell it. So we kind of did that first to get our feet wet, but we kind of knew in the back of our minds that AccessAlly was the flagship product that we really wanted to go out into the world with. And so that is a membership and learning management system for WordPress. And it just does, since then, it's like grown a lot, but basically we built it for ourselves first. So it was just coded up in a weekend to replace a tool
Nice.
that we were using before that was causing all kinds of problems on my website host. So it was literally just like, we need to fix this problem. Let's just build it. And then over time, we kept improving it, and we had ideas for what we wanted to do. And then we got feedback once we started selling it from our actual customers, and we kind of incorporated that. And now it's like this kind of all-in-one system that does, membership management. It connects to CRMs like ActiveCampaign and ConvertKit, and it does cool like progress tracking, gamification. It can have teams, so you could sell licenses for your courses, do membership directories, just all kinds of stuff. So it's like grown into its own thing since then.
Yeah, and that's awesome. I mean, especially in 2014 to roll out your own like LMS, like learning management system in over a weekend, it's huge because at the time there weren't really great options, say. I mean, there was,
Mhm.
like you mentioned, you were struggling with some of what was out there because it wasn't the best. Like, because we've been building sites for so long, it's like we've run the gamut of all the different all the different things over the years. Um, so when you were rolling that out, what was the project that you were doing? Because maybe we should rewind just a little bit because I really liked sort of the jump from software engineering into the raw foods which is
Yes.
a complete pivot.
Yeah, so kind of what I was mentioning when I was graduating from my software engineering degree, I kind of had this inkling that, going into the corporate software side of things was not the right solution or the right path for me. So that's when I decided to take a step back, and I was like, I've always been kind of entrepreneurial, want to do my own thing. So I'm going to start a business. And at the time I was reading so many blogs on, how to start your own business, what should you do? And a lot of them said, start a business about what you're passionate about. And I was passionate about healthy eating. And at the time, I was into raw foods. And I was like, yeah, like this is a good market. And I talked to a couple of sort of business coaches, and they were like, yes, raw food is hot. You should do it. So I was like, okay, I'm going to go for it. And so I started a blog called Raw Food Switch, and it was all about healthy eating, recipes and videos and all kinds of stuff like that. And I built my own website, and I kind of did all of that tech stuff on my own. And it started to kind of take off and it was doing well. But there was a part of me that was like, I'm really self taught in all of this. And if I'm going to keep giving people nutritional advice, I should probably go back to school or take some sort of training because it was really a passion thing and not like I didn't feel like I had what it took to really like guide people in their own like health journey. So that was kind of a turning point where I was like, I either have to do that or maybe take a different path. And so for me, I realized what I enjoyed doing in this business was really the website stuff and the marketing stuff. And I realized, obviously with my background, that kind of made sense. And the health stuff and the passion stuff was still a personal passion of mine. I still care about healthy eating, not so much the raw food because I've kind of
Yeah.
come full circle on that too. But I realized, that was a passion thing, but I kind of lost the passion for it when I tried to make it into a business. And that was a big realization for me that, it's something that whatever business you want to start, it should be something that you care about and that you're going to be able to do for like 5, 10, 20 years. And that was a big turning point when I made that decision. So what ended up happening was I kind of put up a shingle and said, hey, I'm going to start building websites now and teach people about technology. And that kind of became like a 6-figure business pretty quickly once I made that shift. And people were even emailing me saying like, oh, we've been waiting for this the whole time. And I was like, what? Like, I thought you were here for this other stuff,
Yeah.
So that was an interesting.
Had you monetized Raw Foods Witch at the time?
Yes. So I was doing meal plans essentially so people could buy those. And then I had sort of a little meal planning app. It wasn't mobile or anything. It was just like on a website where you could log in and kind of drag and drop your meals and kind of, it would give you like a shopping list and stuff. And that could itself have been its own thing that could have grown and been awesome. But again, I was kind of like, oh, this is not quite like what I'm super passionate about. So yeah, I had a couple like revenue streams for it, but it wasn't like a huge income earner either.
Oh yeah. So then pivoting, because I feel like it's a challenge to always be like, okay, I'm done with this. I'm moving on to the new thing. Did you have an overlap for a little bit? Like as you were building the 6-figure design and development house?
Yeah, so I still had a product. So I had an online course also that I should mention in that business. And so I think I relaunched it like once or twice more after I had made that pivot. And then finally I just like kind of said, okay, this is it. Or maybe it was still on evergreen for a while. So people could still buy it. But I wasn't actively like coaching or anything like that. But yeah, because with the web design, I ended up taking on quite a few clients like fairly quickly. There wasn't a need to continue to do more of the coaching on the raw food side. Because I kind of feel like I had like pent up demand for it, even though I didn't realize at the time that people were like, yeah, we want you to do our website. And that was interesting too, because I ended up hiring contractors to help me implement some of the designs. And I partnered with another designer she did more of the visuals and we did more of the implementation. So that kind of very quickly happened just through all the people that I knew, and everything that happened at that point would not have been possible without starting the Raw Food Switch in the first place, because that's how I got to know kind of the community and the network and all of that.
Yeah. And there was just one thing I've always been curious. Did you start with Raw Food Switch and then it just worked? Was that part of the branding? Okay.
No, so I totally bought rawfoodswitch.com. And then I realized after doing some market research and just talking to people, they were like, I don't want to switch to raw foods. Like, I'm sorry, it's just too big of a leap. And then my boyfriend, who's actually my husband now, was like, why don't you just move the S? And you always liked witches and Halloween and stuff, so you could just play with it. And that actually made a huge difference. We had a friend who ended up designing the logo for me of like a little witch on a carrot, and that like was
that
super
Marty?
iconic. It was, yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember.
Totally. Yeah. And like that just made the whole brand for sure. That just moving the S. It was crazy.
Yeah. No, but it's great because it also, I mean, it works from a product and SEO kind of standpoint, but also a distinct brand that was unlike anyone else. Like, yeah, it was really good stuff. And I love then the pivot, like you're finding what it is, because we've sort of come up in this space, this online, like making money entrepreneurship space at the same time. So I think I discovered you first through the work you did with Naomi at IttyBiz, and that was sort of when you
Yes.
were building Raw Foods, which I think I still worked a job back then because you probably started maybe 2008, 2009.
Yeah, 2008 is when I graduated. In 2009 is when I got the website up.
Okay, yeah, yeah. Because I started
Yep.
2010 was my full time in entrepreneurship. So yeah, right along the same path.
Awesome.
So
Yes.
then moving on into um, your design work, but then you grew into more of a personal brand. So what was the impetus
Yeah.
for doing that?
Yeah, I kind of knew like I didn't want to be doing web design forever just because I had actually done a little bit of web design in high school for clients. And I was like, I talk about this a lot. It kind of feels like the spiral staircase where I felt like I was back to square one. I
Hmm.
was like, oh, I'm designing websites again. Like I did this before as like I was not 12 when I was designing websites. I was probably 16 or so and charging like small local businesses in my town. But I felt like, oh, I'm kind of stuck. Like I graduated, I did this other thing, and then now I'm kind of back here. But I realized like, no, I actually like a lot happened in between, and I have a lot more experience on marketing and all these other things. So, don't feel bad that I'm back into web design and use it to see what's next, right? So what ended up happening was some of the people who were coming to me were interested in more strategy for marketing. So I kind of realized it's not just about doing the implementation stuff, but it's also helping people with like launches and the marketing side once they do have their sites up. So ended up starting to take more consulting clients. And one of the things that I was learning on the marketing is just, the consistency of publishing content, right? So I would do a little tech called Getting Techie With It video every week. And I was teaching people, very basic things like how to create an opt-in for your website, how to install an SEO plugin on WordPress, like very basic things, but that sort of my community who kind of came from the raw food space or the healthy eating space, they didn't have those resources at the time. So it really helped them bridge the gap for their businesses or whatever they were up to. And so I kind of kept creating content, started taking on more what I would say general consulting clients, like more business consulting and less specifically for tech. And then people were, it's kind of like it just kept going and going like a little bit further and further, and people wanted more general business coaching. And I realized, okay, well, if I'm going to do that, I want to offer more of a mastermind. I want to, have maybe an event, a live event, which I ended up doing. And so it kind of just like step by step, it kind of got to a slightly different place from where I started. And that personal brand was a big part of it. So I was working with Marie Forleo as my coach. And so she was doing these videos every week. And so instead of doing tech videos, I ended up doing more on camera videos. And so it just kind of like kept evolving and kind of up leveling a little bit more over time that way.
Yeah, and I think that's really valuable because you weren't just saying, "Oh, I'm going to do this and see what happens." You were actually identifying the opportunities. You were seeing that this is what people need, and then you were pivoting and adjusting. And yeah, I think that's hugely valuable and the way to do it. So then a live event also. That is a huge undertaking. How did that go, and sort of what kind of work went into putting that on?
Yeah, so it all kind of came together after I moved to New York City, where I was like, okay, like I'm in a place where I feel like if I did an event, people could come. There's a lot of people in the area. They may or may not have to travel too much to get here. And because before I was living in Canada, and I was like, I don't know if I could do an event. Would people travel to come to Canada to my event? I don't know. So I felt like I was in a good location, and I was like, you know what? I'm just going to set a date and just invite people. I invited all clients that I'd ever worked with. I invited obviously my email list, and some people I comped, some people I gave like very cheap tickets to. And, I invited my friends to speak on stage, and I was like, okay, like, let's just see what happens. And I know that the first year is not going to be super awesome. I mean, it was good, but it's just going to be an experience. Right. And so I set the date, and I think I gave myself like 5 or 6 months from the date to get everything organized and like tell people, invite people, which I would not recommend. At least give yourself a year if you're going to do
Yeah.
something like that. But it ended up being really great. I think we had 80 people at the first event, and we had some really awesome speakers, and we ended up recording it. And then once you have something to show people for next year, it's so much easier to get them to realize the value of going and taking time out of their lives to be there. And then what I ended up doing is I used it as a launching off point to sell and offer my mastermind, which was basically a 9-month program with coaching and strategy and retreats and all kinds of good stuff too. And I did end up doing another event also the second year in New York. I don't remember. I think it was like 120 people. So it grew a little bit. And then the year after that, we moved to Texas, and then we did it in Dallas, and we had about 200 people that year. So it was like on a nice little gentle growth trajectory. And we also used it as a bonus, took it as a bonus for when we were selling our online courses. So that was really cool, because what we saw is that people would meet in the online course and then say, hey, are you going to the event? I'm going to go. I want to meet you there. So that was like another way to kind of build the community and give people a chance to connect offline. And and it worked out really, really well that way.
Yeah. And I love it's the continued action. Like you keep taking actions, doing more, and not like you're not focused on growth. It doesn't seem like over this journey. You're focused on adjusting and doing the things that the market is actually asking for. So when you dove into AccessAlly, that was, I mean, it's a big product now. So you mentioned how you started in a weekend. How did you balance sort of shifting your resources from the personal brand into the product?
Yeah, that was an interesting balance. And we're still sort of recovering from that in a way, which is a weird thing to say. But we put a lot of resources, originally on the personal brand and those coaching clients and our online courses and our content. We have a lot of things kind of in place from all of that work that kind of accumulate over time, right? And it's almost like I would say like a train or something where you're on this track and then you have to kind of like shift tracks a little bit.
Yeah.
So the actual development was not bad, because my husband was able to really focus on that, because he didn't have as much of a role in the previous business kind of context, if you will. So that was good. But then for shifting the marketing, we did have to refocus a lot of that. And there was definitely a lot of overlap of audiences again. So I was super lucky. I feel like we built what people wanted who were already in our community. So, and a lot of it came from their feedback and their requests. So that helped too. But yeah, just like starting to talk more about that. And then with all of that, at some point, we also ended up having our first child. And that was kind of our cutoff point for when I would stop doing coaching, just because, and masterminds and stuff, just because there's like travel involved and a lot more calls. And I knew like with a baby, you can't really have as much predictability. So that was our own internal deadline. Essentially was like, all right, like before this year, I would rather not be doing as much of that. And so we ended up shifting our mastermind program into more of an experts training program for the software. So a lot of the things that we had learned on running retreats and coaching and all of that, we kind of shifted it into a certification program. And then we layered in the technology, and we kind of shifted who we were marketing it to other experts who are like web developers or strategists or designers. And that was a really good move too, because we didn't have to like throw out the baby with the bathwater in terms of
Yeah.
all the systems and all the marketing and all the things we had learned from doing that. And then we ended up, building great partnerships with these people who were out there using our software and recommending it to their clients.
Yeah, and speaking of the partnerships, you've written a little bit about people being the most important part, like people almost being more important than ideas and things. And how have people then played a role in building your business?
Oh man, I feel like it's all people, right? So we, as it now, our company is 10 people strong at this point. So all full-time people, and it's like I really feel it. It's the people that make the work happen. That connect with the clients, that solve problems, that do all of these things. And our sort of way that we think about things internally is we don't have like quarterly goals for growth, like you mentioned, or things like that. We have, we take care of each other as a team, we take care of our clients and partners, and then we continue to improve our product and processes. And that's basically how we make decisions, how we plan, how we do anything. And I feel like that taking care of each other as a team and taking care of our clients and partners is pretty much at the core of how we've stayed successful and how we continue to grow. Because, with you think about the pandemic or you think about changes in the marketplace or any of that stuff, people tell us we stay with you because we obviously the product is great, but we love you guys, right? And I think
Mhm.
that's the thing that you can't get from just like a random plugin that you buy, or so I think to me that's a big thing that it's something that it's worth cultivating and worth investing in. And it might feel like it doesn't scale sometimes, but going the extra mile for a client or a partner really just makes such a huge difference.
Absolutely. And then when you're hiring, how do you hire for the culture? Because that is, like you're saying, I mean, finding the people that sort of have the same um, maybe internal compass on how they want to treat people, how they want to support people. How do you find that, and how do you pick those people out of the crowd of potential candidates?
Yeah, we're learning a lot about how to do it right. So one thing we've noticed is that hiring from within our network or within people who are already in our community tends to give us that shortcut. So we've actually hired some of our certified experts, and it's cool because we've known them for years, right? So we have experience with how they communicate with people, how they do things. And so that gives us like a shortcut to saying yes, like this is the right fit already. And so that's one way that we've grown very successfully and very like smoothly. And then if we're doing something where we have to like advertise everywhere and they don't know us and we don't know them, yeah, we do a trial period, and we do obviously interviews and other things to kind of get a feel for people. And that's worked out pretty well too. And I think it's also just kind of like trusting your gut sometimes and just giving someone a chance and hoping that it works out. And I know that sounds kind of like iffy, but I think that sometimes it's, giving yourself time to try it out and make sure that it's going to be a good fit.
Yeah, I mean, you never really know until you're there working together every day. And yeah, I think that's great advice. Also, looking within the network, because really, you do people sort of they know who you are, they know what they expect out of the things that you do. So yeah, it's a definitely a little shortcut. I like that a lot. um, when you're growing, so how do you advise that people grow? What would be your recommendation in terms of actual expansion? Because you mentioned you have 10 employees, and each one obviously cuts into the revenues and cuts into this and that, but there's always that little balance of, okay, we need to do this for X. Do you have any sort of advice for people as they grow?
Yeah, so we are just doing this internally with our company. We kind of designed an org chart for the next 3 years of like where we could sort of foresee ourselves. If our growth continues, or if we get, to certain levels, then it makes sense to add on these other roles or these other people to the team. And yeah, we kind of were like, okay, like how do we like afford this, right? So we're not quite there yet, obviously 3 years from now, but we have
Mhm.
time to get there. But yeah, I think it's like prioritizing in the beginning. If you're just starting out, first dollar first, like what can you do to start bringing money in the door? But then as you're growing, I really feel like if you have the cash flow to kind of save a little bit so that you have that money stored, so that if you're ready to hire that next person, or maybe it's investing in a redesign or another project or something, you have that cash in the bank so that you can make those big decisions when the timing is right. And so that's really helped us a lot, just having like a cushion essentially. But then also just knowing that as you're growing, there's going to be ups and downs. Like, so we have a recurring business model, so we can kind of project how much we're bringing in month to month or year to year. So that really helps, obviously, with planning and hiring and all of that. But if you're not quite there, if you're doing the launch model, then I think it's even more important to have cash in the bank, just because launches don't always go as planned, or something happens in the world and then everyone's distracted. But so I would say those are really important things. And then just kind of thinking about who you hire next and how are they going to help short term and long term. So we think about that a lot, because we know that, okay, so if we add another marketing person, we might be able to, expand how many people see us or find out about us. Or if we add a salesperson, then we can convert some of those people that are on our email list or visiting our website to a demo call or something like that, and get them on to find out more about us. Or on the flip side, for us, sometimes is we need to add somebody for support, right? So now that we've grown, we have a lot more customers. We need more people to support those customers. So kind of balancing all the different parts to make sure that you have the growth, but you're also on the delivery side able to handle that as well. And so, yeah, those are some of the things that we think about when we're hiring.
Yeah, how difficult is support? Because with any software product, it's such a huge component of the business.
Yeah, so support is one of the things that we kind of pride ourselves on because it's, like you said, it's such an important part. Like if you run into an issue or you get stuck and you're using a product, you want to know that you can reach out and get some help. And it'll be quick, it'll be the right answer to help you or solve the problem, and then hopefully they'll be friendly and nice, right? So those are the things that we really care about. And we found that if we have people who know the product really well and who are obviously like fun, cool humans, then it works out really well, and people get the right support. And I think we also offer support in different ways. So we have obviously email support that people can get in touch with us, and that's kind of our quickest, best support. But then also we have a Facebook group so people can kind of help each other if there's like a quick thing that they have a question about. And then we also offer tune-up calls. So those are basically calls where 3 times a month, essentially, people can come and jump on. We'll do like a little demo of what's new, or if they have a specific use case they're trying to achieve, we'll kind of show them how to do it live on a call. And then we also have jumpstart calls. So that's for people who are just joining. So we basically help them onboard and get everything set up the right way in the beginning. So we do a lot of different things to help people along the way. And I will say we've learned a lot about how to do support and basically like how to escalate so that, we don't have our our development team all the time in support, because that was in the beginning, obviously it was just us, right? So it was us all the time answering support tickets. But now we have actual people who are awesome at debugging and just, helping people along.
Yeah, and so you're rolling out new things all the time. You're showing through your regular calls, like the product market fit because you're there with the people, you're interacting with the people that are using your product. And how would you sort of determine when you should add a feature, or maybe even remove a feature, possibly moving forward?
Yes. So we've done things like surveys in the past where we're like, okay, out of these 3 or 4 features we're considering building, which one is most important to you? And we've used that to make decisions. We also just monitor what people say in Facebook, what they email us about, like when they cancel, what they say, basically all of these things. And then we kind of collect them into a Jira, which is basically like just a list of tasks and feature requests and stuff like that we're keeping track of. And then we prioritize everything every single week. So we take a look at, what's come in, what's new, which things does it help people with. So sometimes features are like, they're going to help people make more sales. Sometimes they help them manage their sites better. Sometimes it helps the students learn better. So we kind of figure out like, what's the end result from adding this feature or improvement. And so that kind of helps us prioritize a little bit too. And then also if a lot of people are asking for it, then we kind of bump that up too.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's a couple things we've removed or kind of simplified just because it was either too complicated or it had an integration with something that is no longer available or just doesn't work the way it used to very well. So we've had to sunset some stuff too. But for the most part, people are very understanding if we're removing something. And we try to always think long term, like how can we future proof this if we are adding something, what is it going to be like in 5 years? Is this something that's going to create a nightmare for people? Or if we really need to change it like a lot, what is that going to do to people's websites and their members and all of that? So we do think about that before we add stuff quite a bit. And also from like a database and structural perspective to make sure that it can grow. Or like if somebody has like 100,000 members, what is that going to do to their websites? So we do think about that a lot before we make additions and changes too.
Oh, yeah. And it's still a WordPress plugin, or is it a standalone product?
It's still a WordPress plugin at this point.
Okay. Yeah. Are there any plans? Because like visually, you can't even tell. I mean, it looks like it's your own ecosystem, and it looks gorgeous. So
Yeah, so we've done a lot of work on the design side and just like how it feels to be using the plugin to
Hmm.
kind of feel like it's not a plugin. I know that's a weird thing to do, but it just to make it more intuitive and easier for people to use. But yeah, we've talked about it a lot internally of whether we want to bring it in house, not in house, but like kind of hosted platform
Hmm.
kind of system. And we've found that basically our people like the flexibility of WordPress and they're kind of power users. And so we do have plans to make it a little bit simpler in some ways, and then just keep some of that power under the hood for the more advanced users because they want all the cool stuff you can do with integrations and all of that too.
Yeah. And when you started with it, did you start with a recurring revenue model, or did you do launches? Or because I mean that is a huge difference, just night and day in terms of knowing what you can expect over, presumably over the next 12 months. That means a lot for growing a business.
Absolutely. So that's kind of why we started with our pop-up ally product first. So that was a one-off. It was like $99, and we had a renewal for 27 if you wanted support. And so that was kind of our test, right? Just to see like how that would go. And for AccessAlly, I knew it had to be recurring for sure. So we started recurring from the beginning. And I will say, like, the growth at the very beginning was so slow. We had like 4 people for a while. And I was like, oh, why did we do this? This is terrible. But obviously it's grown a lot since then. But yeah, and I think that's the thing. Like with recurring, it's a long-term game, and luckily Papa Ballet was doing well, and we had other sources of income at the time, so it was definitely a bootstrapping process to get there. And people are always like, oh, are you sure? Like it's a WordPress plugin, but it's expensive. Like how are you doing this, right? Because most plugins are like 100 or $200 a year. And we're at $9.99 a year is our kind of cheaper option. And, it really comes down to the value that people get out of it, right? So they can actually sell bulk courses, they can do recurring memberships for themselves. And it just like the level of delivery that they can have and income that they can make using it. Like people tell us all the time, like it pays for itself. So I feel like there is pricing is really important, but also knowing like we need to also support the team that does the software so that they can keep growing too, right? So that's kind of what we tell that. We kind of talk about that, sometimes WordPress plugins go bust and they disappear. And so for us, like we are here for the long term, and we want people to know that when they're investing, that kind of guarantees that we'll still be here, essentially making it better.
Oh yeah, that is huge. And you almost have a recurring model that is as though you're hosting it yourself, which is perfect because it is hard, like you mentioned, like $100 a year on this big plugin. That's not going very far. I mean, you have to, I mean, if you're $9.99 ish for the cheapest one, I mean, that's 10 sales, a 10x difference in terms of how many sales you need just to, I don't want to say break even, but hit the markers that you're at. So yeah, I mean, I love that. That's definitely the way to go. So, but yeah, I mean,
Totally.
what are you, so you're focusing on the permaculture on your own stuff. And then this, is
Yeah.
there anything specifically on either side that you're really excited for?
Yeah, I'm really excited because we just hired a full-time developer to join the team. So they're coming on in January.
Hmm.
Um, and it's been like a long time coming because like you would think we would have hired more developers, but we were like, we're fine. So yeah, so I'm really excited about that because that is like, there's just so much we want to keep doing with the products. So I'm super excited about being able to go a little bit faster on some of those
Yeah.
things.
Up to this
Um,
point, how many people were developing?
basically my husband, and then I would jump in every now and then. So
Wow,
it's
that is,
crazy.
I mean,
Yeah.
that's a huge product for just the two of you to be putting together. Like, kudos
Yeah.
on that. That's awesome.
Yeah, I know. It's like, and part of me is like, we actually did have a developer for a short, like maybe about a year. Yeah, but for the most part, it was mostly like I would say like 90% of the code is, is my husband's code. So
Nice. Yeah, and did you say you have someone planned or you're planning on
yes.
starting the hiring process?
So he's on board and he's starting in January. So we're super excited about that. And
Awesome.
basically, we were like, should we hire someone who's like a WordPress developer or like, it was such a tricky thing to find, but we ended up going with a young grad out of computer science. So I think that'll be an interesting thing to like, we'll have to kind of on-ramp quite a bit, but I think it'll be good.
Yeah, that's exciting. Do you feel any sort of draw to start something new?
I have to actively stop myself every day. Like,
Yeah.
seriously. And that's why I'm like, it's very conscious. Like, I don't want to do a permaculture. Like,
Mhm.
think because like that would be kind of my next direction probably. But I'm really committed to AccessAlly, and I want to I'm a quick start. I don't know if the Colby term, where it's basically
No.
like entrepreneurial people love starting things.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
so I love starting things. And so I have to like actively just be like, no, like, and so what I've done is I kind of rechannel my starting things into within AccessAlly. So it's like, okay, I'm
Mhm.
going to start, whether it's a new piece of content or that I kind of just use my creativity like within the existing structure. So I don't destroy everything every time I have an idea, because that
Yeah.
has happened multiple times.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah. Well, I mean, because there's so many exciting paths that we can run down. So like
exactly.
keeping that, because that is the core of your business. So you don't want to throw that away. You want to keep
Yeah.
growing. What does it, like a typical day look like for you then? Because you wear a lot of hats, it sounds like.
Yeah. So right now, because we're working on this like really big update for AccessAlly, I'm actually developing like probably 60% of my time.
Mhm.
So like committing code and everything. Before that, I was like designing we have another like UX designer. So just working on the interface design. And then before that, we were doing a big SEO push. So I was working on a lot of content, like strategizing around our SEO. Like we're doing a lot of competitor, X versus X on our
Uh-huh.
website, so that people are
Yeah, I saw
comparing
that.
those two, they find us. Yeah, so it just kind of depends like what our big focus is, and it changes like pretty often. And then the another core thing of like what my day looks like is just helping the team. So we have a project manager, like a team lead, and she does most of the day to day with our team. But there's like hiring stuff. There's like, just people things, right? So that's the other big part of my day. So like calls and that kind of stuff too.
Yeah. Is there anything that if you could sort of take it off of your plate, you would that you haven't yet removed?
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking forward to having the developer, because, to be
Oh yeah.
honest, working with my husband on code is like it's not good for our marriage. But yeah, um, so that I'm looking forward to. But yeah, like I enjoy a lot of the things I do, so I feel like it's not like I have to get anything off my plate necessarily. I do enjoy the writing. That's probably like if I had to just do one thing, that's probably one of the areas I would stick to.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
feel like that is a superpower in entrepreneurship. It's like, I mean, it's a
yeah,
consistent practice to cultivate that, but I always want to write, I want to create content, do these things, but I have so much resistance to doing it. Not like I'm the quick
yeah.
start. I start
Yes.
writing this stuff. I have all my thousands of notes in my notes apps of all these like ideas and concepts and even outlines of things, but I never flesh them out because I'm always
Yes.
like back to the code, back to the strategy, whatever it is that comes up. So yeah, I feel like
Yeah.
that's a very valuable skill and passion to have, which
Mhm.
is something Dave and I, we haven't expanded. It's the two of us, 100% in house. But that is the
Yep.
one thing that I wish one of us had sort of in our wheelhouse. But it
Mhm.
makes sense, I guess. Like the clients that we work with, that is their wheelhouse. So,
That makes
like,
sense. Yep.
yeah, Jill, Kidney Stone Diet, like she's constantly creating and working with people and doing things. The Minimalist, constantly writing, producing a podcast, doing all this stuff. So we're like,
Yep.
okay, how do we take this and then build a business that actually works within the confines of like what they're already doing? So I guess it makes
That's
sense, but I
awesome.
always wish for us that we had that sort of innate drive. So yeah.
Right. And maybe that's a third person that comes in and does it, or I don't know.
Yeah, maybe one
Yeah.
day. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've been so averse to growth, not for any particular reason, but just, I don't know. I like things a very specific way, and I also don't want to have any overhead. We try to
I hear you
try to get as
completely. Yeah.
close to like zero as possible. And
Yes.
it's not bad sometimes. Some years we're able
Yeah.
to really get there. But
Yeah, for sure. No, I mean, I totally feel you. And sometimes I'm like, why do we have a team? Like, I love them obviously, but it's like,
oh,
it's a lot
absolutely.
of, you know, everything. But yeah,
Hmm. Well, yeah. Well, and
sure.
cutting
And
in.
it's also motivating, because it's like we need to feed these people. Like we need to make sure
Hmm.
that they are, taken care of. So sometimes it gets us out of bed to be like, okay, like we need to work, because it's not just for us.
Yeah,
So
for
it kind
sure.
of has a flip side, but yeah.
Yeah. Do you have like an in-person thing that you do? Because I assume everyone is remote. Do you do any sort of
Yes.
in-person, like once a year meetups or anything?
Yes. Yeah, we do a once a year team retreat, but which we haven't done for 2 years because everyone had a baby last year.
Oh, wow.
Like, and then everyone with COVID, not
Uh-huh.
everyone, but three of us on the team had babies. So it was just
Mm-hmm.
like a weird year. So yeah, and then maybe we won't have one next year. We'll see how that goes. But yeah, we try
Okay.
to meet once a year.
Yeah. And do you communicate just through Slack? Do you do? 'Cause I'm sure there's a lot of back and forth. Just, I mean, you think of the office generally, people walking around
Yeah.
chatting and sort of staying connected, but when we're remote, it's just different.
Totally. Yeah. So we do Slack, we do Zoom weekly meetings, and then we have like sort of department meetings once a week too. And then we do quarterly meetings and monthly meetings. Like it's
Oh
like a
yeah.
lot of meetings,
Uh-huh.
but like for different things. Like for one's for like our theme of the month, and then the other one is for like just like kind of planning purposes and stuff like that. And yeah, so we do. We're like constantly in touch.
Good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
good.
It's what it takes. It's how you build that tight knit community.
Yeah, exactly. And then we also have like Asana tickets and like not tickets, but like, notes on specific projects and tasks and stuff. And yeah,
Hmm.
it's a lot of
Yeah.
communication for
Oh
sure.
yeah, for sure. Yeah, I don't know how I would how I'd operate within that system like currently, just because I mean Dave and I talk a lot. Like we're just texting each other all the time, but really
Yep.
it's just like, "Oh, hey, do you want to work on this? Okay, cool." And then we're just silent, just working in our little silos. We've
Which is
tried to
sometimes nice. Yeah.
It is
It's
that
like
deep work
really
time.
nice. Yep, exactly.
Yeah, we've tried to work together in different spaces, whether we were traveling for something or Dave lived here for a while even,
Oh,
and
cool.
like, but we never really work together. Like even if we're in the
Mm,
same space, we're more maybe strategizing and talking about ideas, but we're
yep.
never getting any actual
Like
like
trying to,
physical
yeah.
work done. Yeah, so
Totally.
yeah, we had to learn that balance. With everything that you know, everything you've learned and experienced over the decade plus, if you were to say wake up and start over with all the knowledge is exactly there, but the stuff you've done actually hasn't happened yet. You haven't done it. But in the 2020 world, with the knowledge you have, you could maybe the network is a percentage of the size it is, or maybe at the beginning, depending on where you want to look. How would you start over today?
Yeah, so my usual answer for this kind of question is I would go to a lot of conferences, but
Hmm.
right now in
Yeah,
2020,
this year.
this is probably not my best answer because conferences would be all online and that would be really hard to connect with people and network. So, yeah, I would say I would probably look at kind of what is my skill set, what do I like to do, and then what people out there are in need of what I can do. So I think that I probably wouldn't start a software company right away, just because from what I've learned, I don't think it's the best first thing because you could spend years or months just creating something and then not know if it's going to be taken in by anyone, if anyone really wants it, if the pricing is right, if the features are right. So I would start sort of consulting or some other even working for free if I had to kind of get to know like what are people's problems, like what solutions could there be to those problems. And I think that that's always just a much easier way to get started, just because we make assumptions, right? So as entrepreneurs, we're like, oh, I can fix this. I know it's right. But then when you talk to people, you're like, oh no, actually, it's kind of like my raw food switch thing, right? Like people
Hmm.
don't want to switch, and so it could just be like you're like, I'm going to solve this thing by creating this product or this course or this software, but people don't want any of those things. They just want maybe somebody to do it for them, or maybe they want a completely different type of solution than what you were thinking. So that would be my take is I would just find people, and when I say find people, maybe it's on Twitter, maybe it's on Facebook, maybe it's in a Slack group or another community. I would try to find a group of people that I feel like we have some sort of alignment or synergy and I could provide value to them. And that's super vague, but I feel like there's probably something, and I would not start with what I'm the most passionate about, just because that, so for example, we chatted a little bit that I'm really into permaculture and like gardening and kind of the going back to farming and all of that, but I wouldn't like, and I've consciously decided not to start a business around that because that's something I kind of want to keep as a hobby and not have it become a job. And I, yeah, so that would be something I'd be careful of, is not going to what I'm super excited about, but thinking about something I can see myself doing for many, many years.
Yeah, and you're solving problems. I mean, I feel like as entrepreneurs, especially software engineers, software developers, we're problem solvers at our core, and finding the problems that people actually need to be solved. I mean, that is a huge thing. But like you said, it all comes back to people. You would initially start out by rebuilding or growing the network that you have. And I think that's wonderful advice. And I think we'll wrap there. I don't want to take too much of your day. Where should we send people to check out AccessAlly, everything that you're up to and whatnot?
Absolutely. So accessally.com is the best place. And then if you want to build your email list, we have a great challenge that's still going strong. It's called 30daylistbuildingchallenge.com. And it's totally free. You sign up and you get a little lesson every day for 30 days. And it will teach you how to build an email list in a community that would hopefully buy products and services that you have to offer.
Yeah. And I love that. Like you said, you were doing this when you were a teen. So you definitely know a thing or two about building the newsletter, building the engagement. So definitely hope people check it out. Well, thanks again, Nathalie. Really appreciate you taking the time and hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you so much, Jeff. It's awesome to be here.
I want to thank Nathalie for joining me on this episode. Definitely be sure to check out AccessAlly.com for her membership software that we talked about, and also 30daylistbuildingchallenge.com, where she helps you build your email list and grow your business. As always, this episode of Starting Now was brought to you by Built. At Built, we help you get started online. Whether you want to start a blog or a business, head on over to built.co. That's bylt.co to get started. Built, your website built for you simply. Finally, if you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Also, be sure to check out the video version of the show on YouTube, which is my favorite version of the show. Well, that'll do it for this week. Again, I'm Jeff Sarris. This has been Starting Now, and I'll see you next time.